Welcome back to Vintage HLC Show and Tell. Today we're going to look at ashtrays made by the Homer Laughlin China Company in Knoll, West Virginia. Now when we think of these area potteries, we generally don't associate them with ashtray production, but a lot of them did make ashtrays. Taylor Smith and Taylor, Harker, W.S. George, the Hall China Company made over 100 of them, well over 100. But for Homer Laughlin, they only made about 20. So we're going to look at some of these shapes right now. We'll start in 1931 with the Deco Ashtray. And there are two versions. There's this one with the rings that are tightly spaced together in the center, and the one where they're a little more spaced out. They're towards the edge of the inner well. These are marked with the art glaze back stamps. This is leaf green. And this one, you can't see it too well. That's the sienna, burnt sienna brown color, or rust. They were also made in the other art glazes. You can find them in the oven served glazes. And they're often called oven served ashtrays or kitchen craft ashtrays, though they predate both oven served and kitchen craft by a number of years. Also in 1931, two other ashtrays were made. And these are photographs I took at the company. We have this one, which is roughly the same size as our Deco Ashtray, though I've enlarged the picture so you can see the embossing, this little floral center. And we have 6 rests around the rim, and we have embossing detail on the rim as well. And this particular example I photographed had a 1931 back stamp, as did this one, the Daisy Ashtray. Now, I've seen at least one of these outside the company. And the fact that they're marked with Homer Laughlin back stamps would suggest that they actually did go into production. In general, experimentals don't have Homer Laughlin markings, but these both did. It's possible that they did go into production, but they're just pretty rare pieces. As I said, there's at least one of these in collectors' hands, but both of these examples are at the museum at the outlet, the factory in Knoll. So those are your 3 ashtrays from 1931, the Deco, the floral center, and of course the Daisy. Next is the Fiesta Ash Tray from 1936. This was part of the original assortment. It was made for the entire run of Fiesta, so it can be found in all 11 glazes. It was also done in brown for Sheffield Amber Stone and Antique Gold for Coventry Casual Stone. This one, of course, is Fiesta Yellow. It's in pretty bad shape, but I bought this ashtray because of the back stamp, which it says compliments of Butler Brothers, distributors of Fiesta ware. So they were distributors of Homer Laughlin wares for a number of years, not just Fiesta. Next is the Harlequin regular ashtray from 1938 with Fiesta red, spruce green, Harlequin blue, and we have the rings on the inside. These are found in the first 8 colors. The blue one has a back stamp, HLC USA, probably for export. We've seen this back stamp on small pieces of Fiesta before. It's pretty unusual to see it on Harlequin. There are 2 other ashtrays for Harlequin. The ashtray saucer, we have it in maroon. This piece has a little unusual history. It starts off as just a plain ashtray saucer. There's no Harlequin rings. And then they decide to go ahead and add it to the Harlequin line. So they add the Harlequin rings, dip it in the Harlequin glazes, and Woolworth sells it. Again, it's like the other one, it's the first 8 colors only. There's how the Harlequin teacup fits inside. Then there's the Basketweave Ashtray. And there's technically a 4th ashtray, though we don't call them ashtrays, the Basketweave nut dishes. Though when Frederick Reed modeled this shape, he did call it an ashtray. And both of these are based off of Japanese imports. Now this one was made for the entire run of Harlequin. Well, correction, it was introduced after the introduction. So it was made in 1939 and then continued all the way. So you can find it in all 12 colors. The Basketweave nut dishes were made on the first 8 colors only. So we have turquoise, there's Fiesta red, light green, harlequin yellow, maroon. So it's up to you if you want to call these ashtrays or not. They're more commonly called nut dishes. Then in November of 1938, the Golden Gate Exposition ashtray was created. Now when these were made, they backstamped it with the regular Homer Laughlin back stamp, so that's M38, so that would be December of 1938. And then we have this special Golden Gate International Exposition souvenir back stamp. So that's under the glaze. Then it would be glazed and fired, then they would decorate it with these decals and gold edge and fire it again. So we see the Golden Gate emblem in the middle, and we see the colorful decals on the rim. Well, what happened with extra ones that had the Golden Gate marking under the glaze, they used them for oddball decorations or sold them to companies who would decorate them. In this case, this was probably sold to an outside company, given this iridized glaze and gold trim. So you will find these Golden Gate ashtrays with some odd decorations with that Golden Gate back stamp. Sometimes this will be blotted out. This is also true of the Golden Gate service plates, which we will look at later on when we do a video on the World's Fair. Speaking of the World's Fair, there were 4 season ashtrays that were made. I have 2 of them. This one in Fiesta red, which says autumn, has a hunting scene. And this one with the skaters, that says winter, and Fiesta old ivory. There's also, of course, spring and summer. They were done in various Fiesta glazes. There's also turquoise, light green, and yellow. And this has the American Potter New York World's Fair 1940. So we'll look at these again when I do that video on the New York World's Fair. Then we jump to the early 1950s. We have the 7x7-inch square ashtray. So this one's for Canadian Club. This would have been for Hiram Walker. There are 2 versions, one without gold trim, like this one, and the other one would have a gold edge, not marked. These go with the corresponding Hiram Walker jugs. I've already done a video on that. I'll put a link to that video in the description. So this one was probably done by an outside decorator, but it makes use of the cowboy decals that Homer Laughlin also used. That's the gold edge. This one comes from 1953. We usually see these cowboy decals on the rhythm shape. And I think we've already looked at these in a previous video. The dog's playing poker. This one's A Friend in Need. And this one's Poker Sympathy. Now these are marked with a double back stamp. So we see the Homer Laughlin marking from 1953, and then we see Pearl China's marking. And many times Pearl China would decorate blanks from other companies, but in this case, Homer Laughlin actually decorated these for Pearl China for resale. Magnolia decal with gold trim, 1954. Little dog decal, that might be a symbol for some company, I'm not exactly sure. This has a 1955 back stamp. But these square ashtrays were made for a number of years. These were made well into the 70s, possibly even the 1980s. I think you can find them with Pottery Festival decals on them. The train, this was done by an outside company. We have an overstamp, Family Club. The back stamp is 1956 underneath. So those are the square ashtrays. These are very easy to find with all kinds of different decorations, usually by outside companies. Next we have the Alliance ashtray, pardon me. So this would have been used with Saxon dinnerware, and it has a rope border. See if that'll show up. A little embossing on the edge. This was the Regal pattern. We see the name underneath. And Alliance China Company, hand decorated Alliance, Ohio. So Homer Laughlin did a lot of wares for them in the 50s and 60s, actually even before the 50s. And this would have gone with a Saxon-shaped dinnerware set as well, but this doesn't have a back stamp. Fluted ashtrays. These come from the late 1950s. This one was made and decorated at Homer Laughlin. Goes with Sheffield Serenade, a line that uses the Regency shape. No marking. There was a fluted ashtray on eBay not too long ago. It went for quite a bit of money. I can't remember how much, but it was in Fiesta Red, so it was an oddball. Class reunion for East Liverpool High School, 1956 to 1971. Decorated by Bunting, which was a decorator in the area. And these three were all decorated by Cast China of East Liverpool. But they used the Homer Laughlin Fluted Ashtray blanks. Then we have the Dresden Ashtray, which was made in 1962 for the modified Virginia Rose shape. This is Sheffield Blue Dresden. Virginia Rose did not have an ashtray, so they added one to the assortment for this line. And they have the little Virginia Rose embossings at the cigarette rests. Not marked. Interestingly, they use that same shape for Regal dinnerware for Cunningham and Pickett. So you will find that rope embossing with the Alliance ashtray with this decal, as well as on the Dresden shape, or the modified Virginia Rose shape. And it will have the same back stamp. Then we have the Granada Ashtray of the late 1960s. There are only two decorations you're going to find. This one, which goes with Coventry Castilian, grocery store premium, no marking. And then the Granada Green glaze. It's a little speckled glaze with Sheffield Granada. We have that Granada embossing along the rim. Then we have the 4.5 and the 3.5 coaster ashtrays. So our 4.5, look at this one from the Pottery Festival. Has a Homer Laughlin marking in gold. Souvenir of our visit. No mark. And these would have been done with, I think it's Shakespeare Country, a line of dinnerware as a grocery store premium. There would have been corresponding mugs with these coasters. And then we have the 3.5 coaster ashtray. Usually they're in with these solid colors on top, and they go with Fiesta Tom and Jerry mugs that usually have advertising. So you have this little sit and sip set, as they're often called. Sometimes you can find the original box. I actually have one, but I didn't pull it for the video. And then a Gothic ashtray. This is relatively new. You see the Gothic back stamp on the back. Green trim. So that's a little bit about the ashtrays you're going to find. I want to talk a moment about Epicure. And this is a nut dish, or a salesman's sample. We see the Epicure back stamp. It's in pink. They're usually in turquoise, and sometimes can be found in their little baggie with a brochure. They've also been found in charcoal gray. But I want to go over that because it's probably more proper to call it an ashtray than a nut dish. But in this booklet, which was published in 1985, when Fiesta was reintroduced in Charleston, we see an Epicure ashtray. So we'll turn to the page. This was published by Golden Seal, by the way, which is a magazine in West Virginia that covers historical topics. So on this page, we see a picture of Epicure, and we see this Epicure ashtray. And I've never been able to see one of these in person. I don't know how it's marked. I don't know its weight. I don't even know if that's the actual Epicure glaze. It probably is, but it's hard to tell from the picture. So there's a reason why I'm showing you that now, because we're going to come back to that. Here we have some sketches, or photocopies of sketches, by Don Schreckengost, and these come from the early 1950s. And it's clear that he was going to make some ashtrays for cool cigarettes. And we see the little penguin here with his pork pie hat. He's smoking a cigarette in this fluted ashtray. The second drawing has some shading detail with some notes on the color to be blue and green. Here are two more ashtrays. Here are the penguins on roller skates. And here he is again with a cane. Some shading details. A square ashtray. This is 4x4. There again, our penguin's sitting there smoking a cigarette. We'll see the shaded version here on the next page. None of these went in production as far as I know. Rather interesting one. Has a rather deep profile for the cigarette to rest inside. And there's our penguin playing golf. Some shading detail. Then we come to this one, and there are two versions of the penguin for the tab extension. Here he is standing there smoking a cigarette, and here he is as Dr. Cool with his little medical bag and a stethoscope. But this should look familiar. This is the one we just saw in the picture a moment ago in the booklet. And there's some shading detail with him standing there smoking a cigarette. And we have the actual drawing of the Dr. Cool version. Now this was given to Joe Cunningham by Don Schreckengost. And there you see the penguin. There's the ashtray, there's the side profile. On the back it has the drawing number and some information. But we bring this over here, and there's our Epicure ashtray. And this would have been done in the early 1950s, before Epicure. Now, after Epicure was released into production, they did model several different ashtrays. So it makes sense that he probably would have revived one of these drawings in this form of this ashtray at that time, though I'm not 100% sure. I should also mention that there's at least one collector that has an Epicure ashtray that is essentially the nut dish with raised cigarette rests in the middle. I've only ever seen one of them. It's actually a collector who's online on Facebook who showed one of those recently, which was a bit of a surprise. But what's going on here with this one, I'm not 100% sure. But I'd like to see it in person, though I've never seen it. The only time I've ever seen it is in this print magazine from 1985. I have no idea who owns it or what has happened to it. But it comes from Homer Laughlin China Company, Fiesta of American Dinnerware, by Golden Seal from 1985. So that's it for ashtrays. I'm sure we will look at some more in the future, but these are the common ones, the ones you're more likely going to find.